Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Hakodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful that got them pushing this word and truth. And it's a series across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Alright? And what I want to get into, alright, is another in transit, dealing with, teaching growth. Elder Apostle Ariamlab just did a live stream, going into just teach the word, and as being the Israelite, has become commercialized. A lot of people know, a lot of our people know that they're Israelites, okay, and don't understand what they're a part of, because a lot of our people, they have the skin of being the Israelite, but they don't have the breath, okay, and to them, just like even what you guys said, this is just a movement or a trend, to Israel. There are a lot of Israelites that are just cosplaying, but there's a remnant that's deadly serious about this thing. This is our everything, okay? Like, this is precious, and it's not about, when you look at on the surface level, people look at Israelite, as associated with particular characteristics, but not understanding that in this truth, man, there's supposed to be growth, okay? Because on the surface, you see, you can put on some fringes, okay? You can put on the head wrap, a dress, keep a few laws and reverence the Sabbath, and it's like, okay, I'm good. I done arrived. And there's a lot of Israelites with their mindset, they keep a few laws, 3-4 laws. You see, they reverence the Sabbath, okay, and they put on fringes and head wraps, and it's like, okay, I'm good, and that's why the truth, gets boring to a lot of people. That's why they gotta constantly add gimmicks, okay? They gotta, do this the fashion show and the music video and the dance off, and they gotta do all these, they gotta add all these gimmicks because they're not growing. See, the truth becomes boring to a lot of people because they're not growing. You see, when we're growing in this thing, the truth is not boring. You see, when we're really growing in this thing, when the Lord is really dealing with us, every day is like a journey. Our growth should be a journey, and every day is likened unto a new day in that journey, man. And we have to understand that, okay, when the scriptures say he must increase and we must decrease, okay, we began to increase in every ambition that we had in this world and fully lock into this. And that's another thing that's offensive to a lot of people, is how much commitment that this truth requires. Because teaching this word, because it's easy, to just, press record on the camera, but the preparation to become a thorough teacher, to understand what's going on, being a watchman. You see brothers editing videos. No, that's a lifestyle. That's a commitment. When you see brothers, that's putting together compilations, always responding to different things and the happenings and, the news and prophecy, that's a commitment. That's a lifestyle. Okay? And living that lifestyle brings us close to our power. Okay? Because pressing record is the last phase, okay, of that, fasting, praying, detaching from this world, and then you press record. Well, that's the last phase of the lifestyle that we've taken on, the commitment that we've taken on. Okay? And see, this commitment is offensive to a lot of people because Jake, so Jake really wants to just be a surface level Israelite, but still do them. And that sacrifice is not acceptable, man. And see, when we keep things simple, it keeps us in the clear. Because I say Jake want to be a surface Israelite because it frees up a lot of time, to still things that they want to still, be tapped into the world to some level. Okay? To still try to, make moves in this world and be this and be that, still have this worldly ambitions because when you're a surface level Israelite, okay, when I say you keep 3-4 laws, you reverence the Sabbath, head wrapping fringes, and I'm good. Okay? You move in that mindset, then it frees up a lot of time. And see, that's what Satan does his damage when we begin to operate outside, okay, of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. When we have all this free time just allotted, we just have all this free time to go and try to move and do this and do that. And that's what Satan operates. That's what he can manipulate the most. You see, Satan can't manipulate Yahweh Shai. And if we're in tight with Yahweh Shai, then it's easy to recognize Satan. That's why just teaching this word and keeping it simple and really living this thing, really growing in this thing, it's easy to recognize Satan. Okay? But, Satan is able to disguise himself if we have all these worldly ambitions. If we have all these things that we still want to do, lust that we are not conquering, discipline, and, we got all this free time to skip around America, okay, instead of being committed to this. And that's what Satan is able to manipulate and disguise himself in different worldly ambitions, man. Okay? So, teaching, the lesson is called Teach and Grow, because teaching, when you really are in tune with this thing, because going back into it, people that are bored with this truth are people that are not growing. Because, me personally, all right, I love learning new things. I love learning new perspectives. And the Bible just has, there's still an excitement I get, opening the Bible, and reading, like, what am I finna read? What type of insight am I finna get when I read this? When I go into this word, like, what is this going to lead to? There's an excitement in there, man. It's just like a scriptures, refer to wisdom as a woman. Because when a man is into a woman, especially a new woman, oh man, there's not a dull moment. Okay? He's obsessed with that thing. There's not a dull moment. When a man, is really into a woman, he's obsessed with it. Okay? Every awakening hour is like, what's next? What's next? And that's how we should be in the truth. And that's why the scriptures say, remember thy first love. Okay? You see? And we should love learning. The scriptures say, speak about that, how we should love learning. I read it a few weeks ago, man. I wish I could recall it. But the scriptures go into how we should love learning. It speaks about he that loves learning. And it's growth. Because every time we read the Bible, we pick up on a new perspective. There's these different nuggets, then there's certain practical wisdom that you begin to apply immediately, man. And that's growth. You read the Bible, you learn something new, then you apply it. Well, that's growth. And there's an excitement in there because we're growing in righteousness. We're growing in things that are pleasing to the Lord. And when we're teaching about a righteous kingdom. We're speaking a righteous kingdom into existence. Okay? People will be like, okay, well, you hate your people, you do, But how do we hate our people when we're speaking a kingdom into existence where everybody gonna be good? Now Jake 2/3 got to go through what they got to go through. That's part of the doctrine. They got to come out, okay? But we're speaking the kingdom into existence where Jake ain't got to sell drugs. Jake ain't got to be in gangs, and the women ain't got to be unprotected and just be traumatized and go through all these situations and nah, man. We're preaching, we're teaching about a kingdom, okay, that's gonna solve every problem we have as a people. So why would we not want to speak about that as much as often, man? Niggas who love sports, they can have, 20 conversations about sports throughout one day. You know? They get excited about that. They can sit there and talk for hours and debate and break down and what they think and speculate on sports. I was, I was a big sports head, man. I still, some brothers into that. We talk about sports, okay? But if we can do that daily, so you mean we can't teach daily? We can all the things that we can talk about and do on a daily basis. But then when it comes to teaching, now we're restricted. Nah, man. Teach and grow. Keep becoming what we're teaching, man. And like I say, when you're growing, this thing becomes exciting. When you're growing in the purpose that Yahweh Shai has for you, this thing becomes exciting, man. We're learning how to serve our King better day for day, man. This thing becomes exciting. It's when you're not growing, it becomes boring. Okay? That's when something becomes boring, when you're not growing. When you start to like a journey to lose weight, it can be discouraging the first, week or two if you don't, because you don't see any results. But once you start seeing the results, oh man, it's a lifestyle now. You start seeing results, it's like, hell yeah. Now you begin the journey. This is why people call it a weight loss journey. Okay, you're excited to learn new things about your body. You're excited to try new diets, see how this do because you've seen the results of it. Okay, that's why scripture saying, brother can post in Psalms 34 and I think it's 8. Taste and see that the Lord is good. So when you, like I say, you begin weight loss, it can become discouraging when you don't see any results. But then when you start seeing results, okay, those results become that constant motivation. And that's why growing in the truth is a constant motivation. You see the growth, okay, and you base your growth not on comparing yourself to people of the world. No, you compare yourself to, the scriptures, man. Okay? And then you compare, yourself to how you were in the truth, last year, a few years ago. That's how you compare growth. Okay? Because if we just compared ourselves to people in the world is degenerating, going backwards. So we can be stagnant and not growing, but it looks like we're growing because, the earth is getting worse. This generation is getting worse. Okay? And you compare yourself to a nigga in the world, it's gonna seem like you're doing excellent. Okay? Because niggas are getting worse. You see, you compare yourself to just a random 2/3 nigga, compare yourself to the 2/3, it's gonna seem like you're doing stupendous. Okay? You women, you compare yourself to the women in the world. Okay? She got pants on, yeah, it's gonna seem like you're doing excellent. Okay? But when you compare yourself according to the scriptures and according to, your old self in the truth, then you'll see, okay, that's a real mirror of your growth. That's a mirror of our growth, man. Because the Lord always put us in similar situations, and we have to compare, okay, how did I react this time compared to how I reacted last time? Okay? how am I handling this situation compared to how I handled the last situation? Okay? And that's how you measure growth. And one thing about growth, helps us to be more efficient. You see? Growth helps us to be more efficient into this thing. And see, when you start to grow, then it gets to a point to where now, like I say, it's exciting and fun. You know? Because going back to it, like when I just making a point, I played football and I was like I said, I was a late bloomer. I started to fill out, a little later than everyone else. So it was tough, playing, with young Jake, that was hitting that growth spurt and, getting stronger and faster. Then it got to the point to where, the sport, it wasn't that fun anymore. I had a love for it. I did it. But then when I hit my growth spurt and I started to develop a skill set, okay, I started to grow, then the sport became fun again. It became exciting. You see? But when I hit that moment of stagnant, like damn. You see? But then I say when I hit my growth spurt, then it became fun again. So in this truth, we got to stay in that growth spurt, man. You got to stay growing. And there's so much that we need to work on in us, man. That's a full-time job. Working on the inward, man, it's a full-time job. And that's only a portion of the job that we have in the truth, man, being a watchman, looking out, seeing what's going on, the happiness, and you got to love to see prophecy, developing, man. Like, you have to be excited about this thing because we know how it's shot on the way, man. Everything we want is right here at the door. Okay, and we have the privilege to teach about these things, man. As we're teaching, the elect are being edified. This is nation building. When we teach, this is building the nation. There's men and women that are being edified and built up for the purpose of nation building, man. This is actually nation building when we teach, man. We're not just here teaching to be seen, to be cute, to be popular, man. Nah, man, we're here for those sincere believers that are being edified and built up, man. This is nation building, man. Okay? Through this teaching, the Lord is preparing his people for nation building. Okay, an actual dynasty, an actual empire, man. This is what we're teaching about. If we desire these things, and see, the Lord is finna be a real refreshment in the earth, man. Scripture speak about the refreshing of all things. Okay? Finna be refreshed, man. We finna get new bodies. We finna have power, true power, raw power, man. Okay? We're not gonna need, military hardware. No, we're gonna have raw power, man, that goes beyond, just military might, man. We're gonna have raw power, man. We're gonna be guys in the earth, man. We don't want to talk about this every day. Sometimes, multiple times a day. And look at the example that the apostles and the elders are setting before us, man. These are men that have fully taken on the commitment of the truth, man. You have daily examples of men that have fully taken on the truth, the commitment that comes with the truth. And everybody wants perks, but no one wants commitment. You see? No one wants to deal with the commitment. The commitment produces the perks. That's another thing, Esau's society is so unnatural. Okay? That people think that perks, can be got through shortcuts and scamming and you see? So, like I said, Esau has such an unnatural, society set up to where, people are rewarded, for nothing. That's unnatural. Live in a society that's not based off merit, to where you're not rewarded by commitment, sacrifice, your skills that you acquired over time. Okay? That's how the reward system is supposed to be based off of. But we live in a society where people are rewarded for nothing. Okay? And that creates a society to where people don't want to be committed to anything or rewarded for everything. And that's just not how it works, man. So it's true. Okay? There's a commitment, and the commitment produces the perks. Okay? Even when you go into the book of Sirach, chapter 6, you start like at the 20th verse. Okay? It goes into, putting ourselves in the fetters of this truth, making ourselves slaves and prisoners to this truth, man, to this wisdom. And as you read down in that, it talks about what? How eventually this wisdom, okay, will clothe us in robes. Because that's the perks of that commitment to this wisdom. Being a prisoner to this wisdom, man, and really applying this thing and living this thing, man. Not only when it's convenient for us, okay, but when it's applying this wisdom and staying committed, even when it calls for us to do particular things that we don't want to do, man. Okay? And that goes into being a prisoner to this thing. You see? Because, the flesh wants to play it safe. The flesh don't want to take chances in faith. You see? The flesh, wants to play it safe. The flesh has to, have everything figured out. But now, man, when we moving in faith and trust, it requires us to be obedient even when we can't see the finish line. Abraham, because even when you go into Abraham, before the Lord started dealing with what, he had to be removed, he had to be isolated. Okay? He had to step out, move different, be different, because that wasn't a small thing, Abraham being separated from his family. Okay? You have to understand, especially back then, especially you being a son, then there was expectation on you from birth. Okay? It wasn't like now, you have, it wasn't, random like now. You just have children and, they grow up, watching cartoons. Nigga might play football this year, might play basketball, nigga might, you just randomly going through life. You don't know what he gonna do, he might wanna go offshore, that don't work out, he come back and now he wanna go to school and see, it wasn't random, no. In the ancient world, you was born into your purpose. Whatever your father was, okay, you was born into whatever he had going on. And there was an expectation laid upon you from birth. Okay? So you have to understand that Abraham walked away from expectation that was upon him from birth. There was probably a certain, piece of land that, that was going to be given to him for him to carry on. There was certain, business deals and networking that was already established for him to, take on under his father. He stepped away from that, man. So he stepped away from earthly commitments, all right, and committed himself fully and began to follow, okay, Yahweh Bashim al-Shah, not knowing where he was going to end up. Okay? So, the Lord requires commitment. Okay? And as we, are committed, okay, well, this commitment produces growth. Because when you're committed to something, you're going to grow. Like I say, if you're committed to weight loss, you're going to lose weight. If you're committed to, being fit, being in shape, you're going to be fit and in shape. If you're committed to studying learning, you're gonna learn, you're gonna increase, you're gonna grow if you're committed. You see? If you're not really committed and going through the motion ain't committed, like nah, you gotta be uncomfortable. You know? We gotta be committed to the point to where it's uncomfortable most of the time, man. You see? Most of the truth is about being uncomfortable, man. You know, whether we're in uncomfortable financial situations or, you know, more than just, you know, just plaguing us in the mind with uncomforts, man. Putting us in, you know, situations of you know, high stress, okay? Whatever it might be, but most of the time in the truth is going to be uncomfortable, man. You know, and as men, we embrace that because men, you know, we can maneuver in uncomfortable. You know, and then we learn once you embrace being uncomfortable, you thrive. Because it don't have to be a perfect set, you know, for us to fulfill our office, man, to teach and be watchmen. We don't need the perfect set. Okay, the bare minimum, man. You see, because as like I say, as men, we're supposed to thrive in uncomfortable situations. Okay, and I truly believe, man, that the men that the Lord is dealing with, they're gonna thrive in Jacob's trouble, man, and a whole nother level through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. And right now, it's about teaching and growing, man. Okay, because before we get to Jacob's trouble, there's a certain, you know, level of growth that's required of us in this grace period, man. Use the grace period wisely, man. And right now we have all the tools we need, man, to teach and to grow. Okay? The body of Yahweh Shai is growing. Okay? That's why there's certain things that are not tolerated. That was once tolerated because why? The body is growing. Okay? Certain things that used to trip us up, it doesn't trip us up anymore because the body is growing. You see? So the body is growing, okay? There's certain things that we used to be comfortable with that we're not comfortable with anymore, man. Because the body is growing. Okay? So the body of Yahweh Shai is a growing body. It's not stagnant. You know? And what can make us stagnant, like I say, is what can make us you know, stagnant is not really being committed. You know? Western mindset is stagnation to the spirit because it's anti-Messiah. Okay? Any form of Western thought is anti-Messiah. Okay? And it stunts growth. Okay? So we're in the time now as because in order to really teach and be thorough and be potent, you got to study. As we're studying the ways of the East. We're studying Eastern thought, Eastern mindsets. Okay? And you look at our forefathers, you know, even some of our foremothers, one thing about it, they were selfless, man. You know? You look at how our forefathers moved, they always thought bigger than them. When Jacob was wrestling the angel, he was doing that for his lineage. He wasn't just wrestling an angel so he can have a story of triumph in the Bible. He wasn't even thinking about no story. He was thinking about, okay, being securing a blessing, all right, for his descendants. Okay? He's always bigger than them. Abraham, you see, he moved based on promises, and the promises was that him and his seed, the Most High, would be a power to him and his seed after him. So Abraham was making these moves and being obedient, not just based on him, but with his descendants after him. Okay? Yahweh Shai. He said for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He wasn't just thinking about, okay, the glory he was going to return back to. He was thinking about everybody returning to that glory. The whole nation, beginning with the first fruits, beginning with the elect. Okay? So, you look at, when we read, I'll say, because in order to really teach, you have to, stay sharp with reading and studying. But you're reading about men, okay, who were selfless, man. You read about even women. I say even the women of the Bible, they were selfless, man. They wasn't thinking about themselves, man. All right, Sarah was thinking about Abraham's lineage. She was thinking about the lineage, man. That's why she like, look, my husband need an heir to carry on his legacy. Okay, that was her mindset. Even when you go to Judah, you read the book of Judah. Which a lot of women, a lot of Israelite women, they'll read, the book of Judah, and they read it from a feminist lens, and they like, damn, she was running shit. She was telling men what to do. She was in the spirit, and the reason that she even had, she was able to have access to the leaders of Israel because of who her husband was. All right, he had to be a great man amongst Israel for her to even be have any type of familiarity with those men. He had to be a man of great reputation. Okay, but you look how Judith moved. She was selfless, and where do you think she got being selfless from? Her husband. Okay, then she never remarried. She was a beautiful woman. She never remarried. Okay, because of what? After her husband died, she was good. Okay, you see, you gotta look at it from that aspect. And then even what she did, she put her life on the line for the nation. Okay, she didn't boast in, I'm telling men what to do. These men cowards and I'm strong. She didn't boast in that. No, she put her life on the line because that could have went left. You read that story, that could have went left, man. All right, but she had faith that she was putting on for a nation. She didn't think of her life. It was about her people. Okay, going back to Abigail. Abigail didn't think about her life because she could have went out there. She went out there to some killers, man. That was King David and his men in their rough and rugged stage, man, out there in the wilderness, man. She went out there in the midst of some killers, man. Okay? But it was bigger than her. You see? So when we read these scriptures, we go into it, the spirit of those, of our forefathers, that spirit comes upon us, man. That puts us in a certain spirit, man. But it comes with being tapped in. Okay? Because if you're occupied, the scriptures say, what, Sirach 39:1, he that giveth his mind to the law of the Most High is occupied in the ancient wisdom and prophecies. Okay? We begin to be occupied in this thing. This is our world now. This is what we exist. The scriptures speak about those that what? Make the Most High their dwelling place. We're going to be protected in this time. Because what? We made the Most High our dwelling place, man. Okay, this is where we dwell, in this wisdom and this understanding. Like I say, like when we read the scriptures, it's like you go into that time period, man. It's like you go into that era. You see? Because we don't have any reference in this world. You look out in society, there's no reference of a particular type of righteousness and faithfulness and trust. You gotta go into the scriptures, man, and draw from the scriptures. Okay, and as we draw, what do? We teach. We pass on what we've learned through teaching, man. And as we teach these things and then we apply these things, we grow. And as we grow, okay, it creates excitement, man. Growth is any type of, growth is exciting. You know, if your bank account is growing, you will be excited. Okay, if you had a business, your clientele is growing, you will be excited. Okay, if you're an artist, you see your following is growing, you will be excited. Okay, growth produces excitement. You see, so how much excitement should we have as we grow in Yahweh Bashim Shai? You see, so we'll just and mainly to you brothers, keep it simple, stay out the way, teach and keep growing. Okay, because we're growing into joint areas with Yahweh Shai. You see, this is not something light that that we're growing into. No, we're growing into joint areas with Yahweh Shai. Okay? This is something major. This is something eternal. Okay? And if we really believe, all right, this thing is exciting to us, man, because we're seeing prophecy happen in real time. You know? We're seeing the Lord, all right, make good on all his promises, man. Okay? So, that's the point. We can always speak more. We just want to touch on that. Like I said, I'm out and about today, doing a lot of ripping and running. I like to sit down to get into it, but, like edification must go forth. So, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edify once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS, who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards your other brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful. Shalom.